Albert Breer will be visiting the Jets and the Giants next. He's been to 18 training camps. By the way, we were talking about this earlier, is that Bill Belichick romanticizes football. He loves the history of it. And Chad Johnson, Reggie Wayne, Mohamed Sanu, Zeke, Cam Newton. He loves these players, but he gets them in when they're out of juice.
Tim Tebow.
Yes.
Tim Tebow.
He gets guys, and they're done. Like Zeke's a 3.5 yard a carry guy. He loved Cam because Cam had been good against him. Mohamed Sanu. Chad Johnson he loved for years. And I do think Zeke is a good pass blocker. He really is. He can really help. But they generally protect their quarterback fine. Our takeaway is they could have had Dalvin Cook, who's still in his prime. Why didn't they just pay for him?
It's a good question. And I think the best answer is twofold. One, it's the money, like you said. Like, that's definitely a part of it. I think the other piece of it, this kind of goes back to something Jerry Reese once told me, Colin, and this was probably like over 10 years ago, but and he was still the GM of the Giants at the time. And I remember asking him about how they continued to draft defensive linemen. And you remember that. Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck, O.C. Umenyiora, Matthias Kiwanuka. They just kept stocking. And what he said was interesting was he was like, that's our identity. So he's like, we can't have an injury rob us of our identity. So, like, not only do you have to stock places where you're weak, you also have to stock places where you're strong, because if you lose your strength, then who are you? And I think that explains the Zeke signing. Ramondre Stevenson is probably their best player on offense right now. And he does a lot. He's a 230-pound guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. And you look behind him, and Damian Harris is gone, and they drafted a couple of kids last year that don't look like they're working out. And to me, this is like kind of goes back to that Jerry Reese premise of drafting defensive linemen. This is maintaining your strength. Now, Ezekiel Elliott, what he was 4 years ago? No one thinks he's that. But can he be, I guess, a facsimile of what Ramondre Stevenson is bringing to you? If you lose Stevenson for 3 or 4 weeks, yes, he can be that. And can he take some of the load off of Ramondre Stevenson so he isn't as worn down in December and January? Yes, he can do that. So I think that that's what this is about. It's almost like when you have a backup quarterback, you want to have him look a little bit like the starter, right? Just so you don't have to flip the offense upside down if the starter goes down for a few weeks. Same sort of premise here. Like, I think Zeke does a lot of things that their best offensive player now does, so he's good insurance for Ramondre Stevenson.
So we started our show today talking about there's about 3 implosions in the NFL each year where a team has high expectations or they're ascending. Mm-hmm. Arizona, the Rams last year, were real implosions. And I said the one team this year, now they're coming off a bad year, but they have a Hall of Fame potential coach and quarterback in Denver, and you've been to their camp, is that I could see Sean Payton, because remember, Russell's contract, he's still playing on the Seahawk deal. That thing doesn't start until next year. If this thing is ugly this year, and I mean not ugly like D, like B minus, bitterness that the GM who made the deal still in the building, new ownership pressure, Sean's making 18 large a year, heat, Russell Wilson's contract kicks in, it limits what Sean can do. I do think I have positive vibes with Denver, but I think in 6 months, February, we could have a mess on our hands. That's my potential tire fire in the league. You were there. Did you sense the pressure around that? Is it a powder keg to you?
It's so different. It's so different, Colin. I mean, Russell's invisible. Like last year, you couldn't take 3 steps with realizing Russell Wilson was the quarterback. Like now, it's Sean Payton's show, and that was very clear being there. I mean, they were running gassers after practice. I asked Sean about that afterwards, and he said we've been doing that every day. And you don't see those sorts of things at NFL training camps anymore. So this is old school, the way they're doing it. He's setting the tone the way he did back in 2006 in New Orleans. And everybody there is on notice, including Russell Wilson, that it's his show now. And so I think so much of this is going to come down to how Russell Wilson buys into how Sean Payton's going to play him. Sean Payton's not going to play him the way Nathaniel Hackett played him last year. And I think whoever got Russell Wilson last year was going to go through this, right? Where Russell was going to see what he looked like in a pass-happy offense. Because I think he always believed that he'd be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning if he got that. Well, it didn't work. And so, I think Sean Payton believes the best way to deploy him and use him is use him the same way Seattle did. Move the pocket, get him going in the run game, involve him in the run game, use him to boost up the run game and get more out of Javonte Williams. Will Russell Wilson buy into that? Will he be a willing and aggressive runner? Will he be making plays off schedule the way he did in Seattle? I think those things are going to determine whether or not this works. If Russell Wilson's willing and still able to do all those things, I think it'll work because I think Sean Payton's a brilliant offensive coach who can get the most out of a quarterback, but he has to buy into it. And so that's the important part. Indications are he is buying into it. We'll see when the season starts. And then I think the other thing here is just what you got back to off the top, which is how does the offensive line come together? They bring in Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. They spent on offensive linemen. Does that offensive line group look good in front of Russell Wilson? That's going to be a major factor because, as you sort of alluded to off the top, when you do see those big box implosions, and you can go back and look at this historically, Colin, a lot of the big box implosions happen because a team falls apart on the offensive line.
Rams,
how do those big money signings look at the end of the year? Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey, I think that's a big part of it.
So you went to 18 camps, and I'm looking at all the camps here, folks. Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, some big brands out there, Vegas, Minnesota. I got to ask you about Kansas City because they feel like the reigning dynasty, and you covered the Packers, or you covered the Patriots forever. So you were hovering around for 10 years a dynasty, and now we've got a new one. Are there similarities in confidence and culture between the last dynasty that was your team and the new dynasty that's everybody's team and you cover as a national guy? Do you feel some similarity? Now, one's defense, do your job. The other one is creative, clever, ring around the rosy, new stuff every 15 minutes. But do they feel similar at all?
Yeah, there are a few similarities. Coach and quarterback's the obvious one, right? Like, we don't have to go very far on that. Mahomes and Reed, Belichick and Brady, that's a very, very obvious one. I think there are a couple others too, though. The quarterback obviously is able to patch holes, so you can do it with a little less. And Brady was always able to do that. Like, you look at how well the Patriots played after they traded Randy Moss in 2010. Brady won the MVP that year.
Yeah.
And people forget, after a month, they traded Randy Moss. Not before the season, in season.
Yeah.
But what did Pat Mahomes do last year? He won a Super Bowl after they traded Tyreek Hill. So you've got a quarterback that's capable of patching holes. The other thing is now you have an advantage where people want to play with that quarterback. So, the Chad Johnsons, the Joey Galloways, the Corey Dillons, all those guys wanted to come in and play with Tom Brady. You're starting to see that with Mahomes. Where did Juju Smith-Schuster go when he needed to revive his stock? He went to Kansas City to play with him. So that's another similarity. And then I think that there's this pipeline of people, and this is a really important part of the Patriot dynasty. I think you're seeing it in Kansas City. When they lose somebody, there are people coming up to replace them. And I really think you saw that on defense last year with the rookie class they put together and the amount those rookies played. Guys like George Karlaftis, all the corners, Trent McDuffie, obviously among them. Cook looks like he's going to be a really good safety. And then on the coaching staff, they lose Eric Bieniemy, they have Matt Nagy ready to go, right? So I think there's this pipeline of people where, they may not have superstars behind every position, but they've always got somebody capable and ready to go. So those would be the three things: coach and quarterback, the quarterback's ability to do it with a little bit less around him. I guess it's four. The quarterback's ability to attract people to come in for less and play for them. And then, the pipeline of people flowing through.
So, there's one team in the league, J-Mac, you can guess as I ask this question, that generally, if you get offensive coach, he doesn't have to be a legend because Zach Taylor wasn't a legend when Burrow arrived. Offensive coach, a playoff quarterback, left tackle, couple of weapons, good pass rusher. If you have elite players at those, you win a lot of games in this league. Mm-hmm. Here's the Raiders. I got McDaniel, Garoppolo, Crosby, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Colton Miller, and I look at them and I think, everybody's saying the Raiders stink. Now, I would admit they have been like Cleveland. They can inflict their own wounds. But I watched them this weekend. I saw their backup quarterback. He looks like the next Brock Purdy. And I'm thinking, what? You were at the Raiders camp. What was the vibe there?
I think the vibe is that they're going to do better on the margins this year, that they're smarter. and that they're more versatile. And, I think one thing that really had to kill Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler last year was how many close games they lost and how bad they were situationally, right? They threw, I think, the fourth most interceptions in the league. Their punt return was at the bottom of the league. It's just like in every which way, like situationally, they were really bad. Hallmark of the Patriot program that those guys came from is that you're really good in all of those situations. And so if you look at like what they did this offseason, it was building up the staff a little bit more and bringing in like Danny Amendola as a returner coach, like to fix the punt return specifically, like doing little things like that on the coaching staff. And then, on the roster, you see like where they brought in guys who are leaders. And so like there's a bet there that bringing in Marcus Epps from Philadelphia is going to help Trayvon Merrick get better at safety. There's a bet there that bringing in Spillane from Pittsburgh is going to help Divine Diablo get better at linebacker. So, you have, I think, a middle class of veteran players that are smart, tough, mature players that, the Raiders are banking on to make them better situationally. Like they feel, like you said, like the top level, they took care of that when they went and they got, Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams in the last offseason. They inherited guys like Colton Miller and Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams. And now they go in and they get Jimmy Garoppolo. It feels like the program's a little bit more complete now. And so I think you're going to see some of the hallmarks of the Patriot program coming to life there now, which they hope will make the difference between winning and losing. And they lost a lot of close games last year.
By the way, you were at that Patriot Houston Texans game. And, Belichick owns rookie quarterbacks. Any takeaway on C.J. Stroud in that game as a whole, D'Amico Ryans?
I just think it was hard. My biggest takeaway is like the NFL has a real offensive line depth problem.
Oh,
like,
God, yes.
It's like if you want to know why like a lot of coaches aren't putting their quarterbacks out there, look at the offensive lines they're putting out there, right? Like you can see it, like, all right, like, well, we don't want to put our left tackle out there, so we're not putting our quarterback out there, right? And I feel like that's sort of what you saw with both CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, where those guys had some ups and downs in their games because they just didn't have the horses in front of them. And for CJ, like, it's hard to take too much from it because he didn't have his two starting tackles in Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, and he's going to have those guys week one, And so having those guys out there, well, if Howard's dealing with an injury, but probably have those guys week one. He has both those guys in there. There's going to be a different context to what he's doing. Now, that said, he did look a little lost out there.
Yeah.
He was a little late on some of his throws. And so that's stuff where you have to make a determination if you're a coach. Do I want him to see more things so I can accelerate his growth process so he's thinking faster out there? Or am I worried about him and his confidence being shattered if we do throw him out there? So that's sort of the challenge for D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio and those guys now, is making that decision. I do think CJ Stroud will be out there week one. And I think what you'll see is probably, an offense that's going to lean, on Pearson, that running game and the offensive line early on, and not ask too much of CJ Stroud. Because it did feel like without the tackles out there, without a starting running back out there, they were leaning on him a little bit in week one. And that's probably why he was swimming mentally out there.
Okay, you're visiting the Jets and the Giants next. It's Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback. He is our go-to guy on breaking NFL stuff and insight and context. We love seeing you again, my man. Thanks for stopping by.
All right, thanks, Colin.
He is so good. So he goes to the Jets and the Giants next. So that is your team, and you're calling it. Now, I don't know how people are reacting. They're probably, anytime you say this team could implode, fans freak out. So I'm sure Giant fans don't like it. I remember when the schedules came out, the Giants wasn't the first one that jumped out to me. I thought I wanted to see what Aaron Rodgers faced with a new offensive line and that stuff. If you look at the New York Giants schedule, not great. So let's just look at it for fun. So Dallas is favored in the opener. So even though it's at home, that's a loss. The good news is Arizona is a game they should win. So let's just get anybody that plays Arizona in the first 2 months, give it a W.
Well, wait a sec. Hold on. Who's Arizona's new coach?
He's a defensive coach.
Where'd he come from?
Philadelphia.
Who plays the Giants twice a year and played them twice, actually 3 times last year?
Philadelphia.
Jonathan Gannon is going to have that defense ready for the Giants.
But
he knows everything Dable's going to do.
I'm just
he knows
trying
Daniel
to
Jones.
be. I'm just trying to be optimistic, Colin.
Oh, optimistic, Colin. Okay.
So Dallas is a better football team than the Giants in terms of overall talent. Okay. So I'm going to give this one to Dallas. I'm going to give the Giants a win. So let's just say they're 1-1 through the first 2 weeks. There's no reason to make them 2-0, 0-2. I'm just going to be right down the middle. It gets really salty really fast. At San Francisco.
That's an L.
Seattle is loaded. At Miami, Buffalo. That is the go to week 3 through week 6 in the NFL, 4 games. Is that the toughest schedule in the league? Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.